Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. So for today's video, we're going to be talking about how Kashtira is going to do in the TCG. So in the OCG, as we have seen, it rose to popularity quite quickly, but it was partially due to the fact that tier limits were hit before Kashtira came out. So since they were already hit, Kashtira quickly solidified itself as the second best deck. And today I want to look at a couple pros and cons of the deck and just share a couple of my thoughts with you guys about how the deck is going to do in the TCG. And I really want this to just be a discussion about what we feel like the deck is like and how it's going to perform like. We're just going to have a couple topics of discussion. So as the first thing, I wanted to talk about the ban list. So obviously tier is going to get hit in some way. That's almost for certain. And it is going to be important how tier gets hit, because if it gets hit to the point where some people switch from it to Kashtira, for example, because it's still going to be a decent deck to pick up. But today we're going to determine just how decent and how strong. So if people switch to it, more people are going to play it and it's going to be more popular. So when people start to side against that deck, they're going to be able to tailor their side decks really just accordingly to Kashtira, because there are some side deck cards that hurt the deck. And when there's a lot of people playing a certain deck and then everybody else is like siding the perfect cards to counter it, it just becomes a bit weird, just like it happened when Jaishan was very popular and everybody played Droll, for example. And some people might also lean towards Kashtira because it's a new and interesting deck, basically, with the support. And maybe they just want something new to play. So there's that to think about when it comes to the ban list. And as the next topic of discussion, we probably first need to determine how good the deck actually is and what does it actually do. So with the boards that it puts up, not only is it able to take away your resources while making their board with cards like Diablosis and Unicorn, so it's taking away your cards, it's also able to lock your zones after it's done with the combos. So because of Shangri-Ira, that's what happens. And if you pair those two things together, so taking your resources and locking your zones on top of them actually establishing a board, that's not that bad. And it's actually also consistent. It's consistent enough because it has 1 to 2 card combos. So the other 3 to 4 cards might be non-engine or extenders and cards to help you play through things or just help you to establish your combos in a much bigger way even. And they also play Pot of Prosperity, which obviously is digging for your resources. So there's that as well to think about. They're also able to make cards like a Rice Heart, which is like their end board, basically. I mean, it's a Rice Heart and other things like Fenrir, like Unicorn, like Diablosis. But the Rice Heart being a Macrocosmos and being able to banish cards from the opponent is huge against some matchups. And they're also able to make the Arsenal Falcon and bring out the Wind Barrier statue, which we all know that we don't really like when it's seeing play in the Flunder deck. There's that when it comes to the actual deck. But I mentioned some side deck cards that are really strong against it. So we probably need to look at those cards as well, because sometimes there's a couple cards that just completely overwhelm a matchup. And when people are just used to the matchup and prepared for the matchup, those cards really come in handy. And at one point in time, everyone is siding against that deck. And if the deck itself is not insanely strong to the point where the side deck cards don't really matter, just like it's happening with tier laments, when a deck is a bit lower on the power scale, it's going to struggle more against those side deck cards. So I have a video on that topic in case you want to check out all of the cards. But just to sum it up, today I'm going to mention Book of Eclipse, which is really strong against it. Lava Golem comes to mind. There's Evenly Matched. There's Hand Traps to prevent the boards. And also board wipes like Dark Hole, Raigeki. But the thing to keep in mind is that Shangri-Ira has a protection effect, but it's only protecting itself. So it's not going to help that much when all of your entire board gets erased pretty much. So there's that. There's strong side deck cards against that deck. But what started to happen is people don't really want those negates and hand traps to completely stop their combos. They're trying out the Adventure Engine, which is strong with putting up Griffin and preventing those negates and board wipes and all of that. And the engine is strong. It's also completely unlimited. Everything is off the ban list and it's really, really nice. It's also not bad going second with being able to push through things with the help of Draco back. But it is still like, the deck isn't even out yet. And obviously there's a bunch of testing that should be happening moving forward with different versions. But it is an option for you guys. And it's an option to sort of like mitigate the impact of those hand traps and going second cards like board wipes and all of that. So there's that when it comes to the strong side deck cards against that deck. And I mentioned that deck building is going to change a bit with the deck. However, what's also changing is the actual builds of the top decks. If you look at the Tearlament Extra deck, people are going to have to run 2 Kitkalas. They might even try out 2 Kaleido Heart, or some decks play double Zeus, because if Zeus is a card that you're able to play in your deck, you probably should play 2 because it's insanely strong to go up against Kashtira. But if they know that, which they will, they're just going to banish your Zeus. So you're going to have to play 2. And it basically forces your opponent to shrink and sort of tighten their extra deck and cut down the cards that might have been very helpful in the past, because they need to play additional copies of some cards, which is really nice. So there's that. Like, you are taking away their resources, sort of, in a way. So that's something to think about as well. And as the next point of discussion, we're going to talk about the deck's matchups. It's really nice against Tearlaments. And yeah, we're waiting for a ban list, but we don't really know what's going to happen. And the deck is probably still going to be really nice. So it has a nice matchup against that. That's also why it was able to do quite well in the OCG, because it's able to hang with the best deck. So there's that. It also is a bit better than Flunder, in my opinion. They do a similar thing. And also against Sprite, it has a nice matchup. And it's also able to push some of the decks out of the meta and out of the top decks, like Draco Slayer, for example, because locking the Pendulum Zones is huge. So sometimes, like we've seen with Bestios, an archetype drops that just completely shuts down something else that wasn't really the most important target to counter, but it happens sort of as like collateral damage, basically. So that's something that's happening with Draco Slayer right now, which was one of the better decks, I think. So it's going to be able to push some decks to the sidelines and really solidify itself, I think. So that's it when it comes to matchups. And as the last thing I wanted to actually mention, sort of going back to the previous topic about side deck cards, what's actually going to be able to carry this deck even further, I think, and make it so it's not that hurt by side deck cards is non-engine. When you look at a card like D-Shifter, the deck is able to run it. It's also able to play Dimensional Fissure if you want, but Shifter is a bit better, at least like main decked. Almost every single deck list is playing it if you look at them. So Shifter is really nice, and when a deck is able to run it, that's cool, and you sort of can like rely on it a bit. Granted, it might not be that great overall in the format, because Kashtira is a thing and it's coming, but it's still going to be nice against tier, so that's really important. So when you're able to have non-engine and establish, like I said, a couple of just annoying things for your opponent to deal with, like locking the zones and all of that, like if your opponent simply negates your Shangri-Ira, the zones are still going to be locked because the effect has already applied and it really has nothing to do with your negate anymore. So they are going to have to physically remove the copy, so there's more things for them to do. And if you pair that with non-engine, I think that you can really like play through those going second cards and just survive, even though some of them are quite strong against you. So all in all, the conclusion I've come to is that Kashtira is going to be one of the top decks in the format, regardless of the fact that there's some very strong side deck cards against it. It's still consistent, being able to establish strong boards, take away the opponent's resources, play impactful non-engine, and it's probably going to see play all across the board because some people just don't want to play and deal with Ishizu Tearlaments anymore. So they might switch to Kashtira, or they might just take up Kashtira just because it's a nice counter to the deck. So I do think it's a deck to look out for. I think it's a strong contender, and I would like to encourage you to check out all of my content on it. I have the introduction, cards to counter it, and if there are any other things you would like to mention when it comes to this discussion, and any of your thoughts you would like to share with others when it comes to how the deck is going to perform moving forward, please leave them in the comments down below. And of course, if you like this video, this discussion, please like it, sub to the channel, check out all the social media, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.